activities will be communicated at a later date. This will focus on the fostering intergenerational dialogue and also acknowledge stalwart who have built this giant organization, especially women. This will be decentralized, that will take place mainly at the provincial level. On the Lily mine, the CEC also took a moment to remember the 3 workers who perished at the Lily mine in Mpumalanga. That was Pretin Kambule, Yvonne Mnisi, and Solomon Nyerende. It has been 5 years since the Lily mine tragedy happened, and their bodies are yet to be recovered. The Federation has also been at the forefront and committed towards the resolution of the impasse. The process of the business rescue has proven to be futile and not producing the desired outcome. Following our persistent effort of raising the plight of the workers and the affected families, a breakthrough was made which led to the owner reviewing its decision of not continuing the operation in the mine. The mine will be reopened. There's an understanding that prior to the reopening, the potential bidder is obliged to pay the outstanding debt owed to the employees, that all former employees are reinstated, that all outstanding debt owed to and all other creditors are settled in full, that the retrieve the container is resumed to last for 6 months. We note that the competing bidder, which Akwi Amanzi, led by Freddie, lodged a court application to litigate the reopening of the mine. Cosatu support the communities and the former employees who have signed a petition to oppose the litigation and fully support the reopening of the mine by Vantage Goldfields. On the health and national health insurance, the meeting has resolved to mobilize all Cosatu leaders, members, shop stewards and staff to 10. The affiliate of Cosatu will coordinate their work to develop sector-specific COVID-19 vaccine rollout promotion campaigns. The national office bearers have been mandated to meet with the People Vaccine Campaign to explore joint cooperation programs. The Federation is calling for more agents to be injected into the production and distribution of locally manufactured vaccine, including the utilization of already existing government infrastructure. The domestic trials and registration needed to be fast-tracked and expanded. We are calling for the high-level network engagement on how to expand and fast-track the sourcing procurement of the COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccine rollout campaign needed to be used as part of the process to implement the NHI, especially in the national procurement by government of the vaccine. We continue to mobilize for the immediate introduction of the NHI. We shall join forces with civil society and alliance to demand the addressing of the current two-tier health system, one for the rich and the powerful, and the other for the overwhelming poor majority. On solidarity with the public service workers, the CEC meeting declared its total support for public service workers and called on government to move immediately to resolve the dispute over the implementation of the third leg of Resolution 1 of 2018. The Federation will not allow a defeat of the public sector workers. We know the full political and economical implication if the public sector workers lose this battle. We denounce and reject the posture adopted by government and articulated by National Treasury. We call on government to respect the democratic institution and upon the unilateral imposition of a wage freeze for the next 3 years and engage union at the SABC about the way forward. The entire government continues to fail the poor South Africans by failing to provide the necessary leadership to resolve the public service stalemate. On gender-based violence, the CEC called upon government to move with speed to complete the process of the ratification of Convention 190. This will allow workers to hold the state accountable for its implementation to translate into a national or domestic law which will help address the scourge of domestic violence and sexual harassment. The authority-centered economic framework is also contributing to the gender-based violence because reports show that women are the most affected by the rate of unemployment. Government cannot claim to be fighting gender-based violence when women are forced to live their lives of brute survival by its economic policies. On legislation, in its reflection, the CEC has concluded that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed many gaps in the country's labor laws. The UIF needs to be modernized to cover typical workers and the changing nature of work. The compensation fund needs to be geared towards future pandemics. The Labor Relations Act needs to be amended to ensure employers are compelled to look for alternatives to retrenchment. The Occupational Health and Safety needs to have the right to refuse dangerous work and to force employers to provide safe working environment. The CEC also calls on government to move with speed on the legislative front because too many progressive bills have been stuck with government bureaucracy for years. These include a raft of land reform and agricultural development bills, e.g. Section 25 Amendment, the expropriation, preservation and development of agricultural land, regulation of land holding, amendment bills. These are critical to accelerate land reform. Other key bills include the Occupational Health and Safety, Employment Equity, Compensation of Injury and Duty Amendment bills on the labor front, the tabling of the State-Owned Enterprises Sharehold Bill will be key to restoring good governance in state-owned SOEs, which have become synonymous for anarchy and looting. Treasury must move with speed to table legislation to allow distressed workers to access their pension fund, the public procurement bill to overhaul an archaic and discrete public procurement system, and the conduct of financial institution bill to protect the right of consumers. The Federation will also keep an education and awareness programs to ensure that workers are informed and empowered to be able to fully exercise their rights and benefit from many progressive laws that represent hard-won victories. Such critical victories include the national minimum wage, parental and etc. On politics, the CEC deliberated at length about the local condition, the state of the working class, and the forces for the let me repeat this. The CEC deliberated at length about the local condition, the state of the working class, and the forces for and against the revolution, and what they mean for our strategy and what should be done. Regarding the domestic balances of forces, the CEC recognized that our revolution has reached a state of stagnation where the motive force is held ransom by other class or social forces. Since Nasrec, the lack of discipline in the ANC has become worse, with leaders and members at all levels showing disdain for the rules of the organization. This makes a mockery of the Mangaung Conference that promised that this decade was going to be a decade of a cadre. The ANC is struggling to function as a unity organization. Since the Mangaung Conference, where the decade of a cadre was declared, we have seen more and more court intervention in political dispute. Political ineptitude and factionalism have created this dangerous reliance on courts. This in-depth discussion of the current political situation also assess what progress has been made in implementing the resolution of the ANC 2017 Nasrec Conference and the ANC 2019 Election Manifesto. The Nasrec Conference was significant because policy position which had long been advanced by Cosatu were adopted. The conference rejected the idea of a slim state and called for the state to define its role as and assert itself in the economy. The delegates lamented government's slow progress in addressing poverty and the deepening inequality. On paper, the Nasrec Conference and the 2019 Manifesto promise advances toward economic policy based on decent work, proposal for a new growth path, a new industrial policy, national health insurance, comprehensive social protection, comprehensive rural development strategy, and an assault on crime and corruption. But progress on these areas has been very mixed and on the whole disappointing. The centerpiece of a new economic policy, the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, has been adopted, but both the SON and the budget fail to provide details and time frames. The alliance is hobbled by government's inability to adopt overarching development strategy or growth path, or sufficiently supporting its industrial strategy, including on microeconomic policies, which are worsened by lack of decisive leadership. The budget that was tabled yesterday was a huge disappointment and another missed opportunity. The concrete impact for the working people since the outbreak of COVID has been devastating. The loss of close to 3 million jobs since the beginning of 2020 has led to the deepening poverty for many families. In the short term, no major recovery in job creation is likely to come out of the budget speech presented yesterday. The Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan is likely to be frustrated by a consecutive microeconomic policy framework that has not been adjusted to the new realities. As a result of all this, among our working class constituencies, there's a degree of despondency and frustration. There's a danger that the next quarter of the century, like the first, will belong to capital and not to the workers and the poor in economic terms. Big business continued to receive tax incentive despite no evidence presented to show that the previous ones have worked. The Alliance faces a serious crisis of legitimacy in the build-up to the local government election. The meeting instructed the national office bearers to convene a special CEC to focus on and deliberate at length on the matter of local government election and Cosatu posture in this regard. On the local government election, the planned special CEC meeting to discuss Cosatu position on its support for the ANC in the 2021 local government election is informed by the political reality on the ground. The CEC meeting acknowledged that there are major problems facing workers that will make it hard to convince workers to support the ANC during the upcoming election. Some of these challenges have left many workers feeling like they are being asked to vote against their own interest. Workers have already made it clear that their support for the ANC does not amount to a blank check and have previously refused to campaign or support candidates known to be corrupt or lazy just because they succeeded in manipulating the ANC internal process. The Federation will also convene a central committee to grapple with these big political issues. On the SACP, the CEC has resolved that we'll need to hold a bilateral meeting with the SACP to share with them to discuss the current situation. The question of the SACP and the state power remains unresolved. We believe that the condition will never be perfect for the party to answer this question. The Federation believes that the party should create this condition. In addition, we shall demand of our vanguard party, or of our vanguard party of the working class, to address some of its internal weaknesses. The party must lead us to build a platform on the struggle for socialism and must also help build the foundation of a socialist economy. Our assessment is that the NDR is at a crossroad, and therefore the role of the party has become even more important in developing political strategies that will rescue it and set it on the right path. The Cosatu NOB's bilateral engagement with the party will focus on the Africa Left Network to synergize with the left forces and coordinate all work already done and increase progress throughout the continent. On the ANC National General Council, we have noted the release of the ANC NGC draft discussion papers, but we believe that none of these papers go far enough in confronting the challenges the ANC is facing. The Cosatu CEC Political Commission will meet to discuss the ANC NGC discussion papers and formulate a program around which delegates can intervene. On the supremacy of the Constitution and the judicial transformation, the CEC affirmed the principle of the supremacy of the country's Constitution. We denounce any attack against the Constitution, and this should not be tolerated. While we admit that the Constitution is an artificial and imperfect document, it remains supreme. It remains the supreme guiding document that was democratically adopted by the people of this country. There are orderly ways of amending sections of the Constitution if people feel they are inadequate. Tolerating misguided and opportunistic attack on the Constitution has derailed many revolutions, plunged them into chaos, and even gave birth to populist dictatorship. While the need for a judicial transformation is real, we reject political opportunism by those who are tainted by the cancer of corruption. Cosatu will continue to push for a judicial transformation in a principled way. In a lawless country where rules do not apply, the working class would be the biggest losers. We need to take a stand in defense of the Constitution and affirm its supremacy in the governing of this country. On the international, first on Palestine, the CEC call upon Israel to adhere to the international obligation to immediately ensure COVID-19 vaccines are equally and fairly distributed to Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, where the battered and impoverished healthcare system are struggling to cope with the high caseload. This should include all Palestinian healthcare workers and prisoners. Noting the upcoming Israel Week on the 15th to the 21st March 2021, Cosatu will host and form part of multiple activities during that week, national and in provinces, to amplify the voice of the Palestinian struggle as we fight for their freedom. On Western Sahara, the CEC called upon the U.S. President Joe Biden to uplift the executive order signed by the former President Donald Trump, which recognized Moroccan sovereignty over the Western Sahara. Cosatu will also mount a campaign that the Kingdom of Morocco be taken out of the African Union, as it does not comply with the principle of the AU. On Swaziland, the CEC called upon SADC community to engage the Swazi King on the need for democratic processes in Swaziland and the freedom of association of trade union and all pro-democracy organizations. As a trade union in the SADC countries, we shall encourage our government to severe relations with Swaziland dictatorship. The Federation planned to organize a befitting memorial lecture in celebrating the life and the times of Comrade Mario Masuku, the late former president of Pudemo, as a true tribute to the great son of the Swazi people of Africa. On solidarity campaign in general, the CEC further reaffirmed all Cosatu Congress resolution on solidarity with Swaziland, Palestine, Western Sahara, Cuba, Zimbabwe, extending solidarity with the people of north of Mozambique. On Mozambique itself, Cosatu is deeply worried about the situation of the Islamic insurgents in the northern province of Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. The brutality that is taking place there is unacceptable, and we call upon SADC and the people of the region to act decisively in taking steps to protect the people from the brutality happening there. On building the African trade union movement, the Federation plans to develop a new strategy to revive the African trade union movement as it is weak, and Cosatu has a central role to play in building that force of workers' power on the continent. On Tanzania, we express our total support for the union in Tanzania and calling for the vaccine, since the workers on the front lines are dying while the president there is on a denial. Thank you, Comrade Stephen.
Thank you, Nopal. President, this is the summary of the outcomes of the supervisory committee meetings that took place over the last 2 days. I do believe it's a very short clear statement, but I'm not going to make assumptions. Let's find out if there are any clarifications. If none, we get to the meeting. If we do have, let's hope that it's not going to more than one round. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Zianda Noble from Newsroom Africa. My question to the leadership is surrounding the judiciary and what you've said about political opportunism. By who? And I'm asking you to be specific because I would like to put it to you that maybe don't you think you should be specific in isolating the specific individuals or organizations that are actually bringing the judiciary to distribute so as to prove that this is an exceptional circumstance and not the norm? Why aren't you actually coming out and being specific about who is actually waging political opportunism? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Taylor from the NCA. You mentioned the budget was a huge disappointment. I just want to get indication, maybe just a quick wrap up on what, maybe the wage issue as well, the wage increase issue, because it's one of the issues there. And then just on the special CEC meeting that talks to the local government elections, I want to get Cosatu's stance around supporting the ANC. You mentioned that there are areas that would make it challenging for workers to vote for the ANC currently. I'm wondering if you can highlight maybe those areas, and if you tell the supporters not to vote for the ANC, what would Cosatu's stance be then going into the local government elections? And also maybe just to add to Zanda's question around the supremacy of the Constitution, did you maybe discuss the former president not wanting to go to the Zondo Commission when speaking to maybe some of the people that are not adhering to the judiciary? Thank you.
Can you see me?
Yeah,
can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Tini, my dear, from Eyewitness News. I've really covered my one question about the wage dispute. Just about the ANC's 2017 conference, you speak about the ill discipline of leaders, but you also speak about how disappointing it's been in terms of some of the issues you've advanced as Cosatu. Just your general overview and resolutions. I mean, the ANC, as we speak, is stuck on an issue of stepping aside. One of the things you advanced is the assault against crime and corruption. They have a Secretary General in that office where there's a debate about stepping aside. Cosatu stands on that issue where he insists that the ABC itself has no right to take that decision, to adopt the guidelines that clear the path towards stepping aside, insisting that he must go back to the branches. Cosatu's position, and also what you've communicated to the ANC recently. And then there's a thing where I've here again covered the issue about the local government elections, but you also then speak to the SACP, and you then say the SACP, the issue of contesting state power, you then say that you believe the party should create the conditions. What are the conditions that you'd like to see the SACP creating in order for this? And also, what does that mean, you know, especially on the back of you saying that it would be hard to convince workers to campaign for the ANC? Are you saying that you want the SACP to make itself the alternative that Cosatu can support? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Sylvester Data Committee and Media. I've been mainly covered by my colleagues. But if I may just ask on the national president, you mentioned about the discussion papers that have been released from the NGC, and you say you don't believe that the papers go far enough in confronting the ANC, the challenges that are faced by the ANC. There are a number of these papers, I think around 12. Looking at your statement, maybe your papers would be the ones relating to economic transformation and the issue of renewal. But can you be specific in terms of parties not connected, which you would want to see in those papers being directly confronted? Secondly, on the issue of local government election, I mean, this is not the first time we hear Cosatu or even the SACP, which you say you're on the whole discussion, talking about contesting state power and you trying to, you know, indicate that you might support the SACP. The SACP did actually try to do this, even though it was in a smaller scale in Nesmapulu, you know, and elsewhere. But everyone did much. So I just want to ask, we have confidence in the SACP's capacity to actually contest state power in the way that you seem to be envisioning it. And just last on this question, since you are saying if we are finding it difficult to convince workers, you know, to back the ANC because of its failure in implementing what workers think should be implemented in government. But in a way, given the challenges that the ANC is confronting, you are decampaigning the ANC ahead of local government elections because the message that we are sending, in the event that you actually choose to say, voters must support the ANC, but this is decampaigning it. The only thing the ANC will even criticize you that we are doing that.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a very, very quick one. Can I also just ask for a reaction to the story around the health ministry? You know, part of the issue around the vaccine program is about communication. And you hear professionals who've been volunteering saying that they've gone to health, saying, please help us, we want to help you communicate the importance of the vaccines. And health says it's got no money. Then you hear about how 82 million has gone to the former private secretary, to business linked to the former secretary of the health minister. Just because I just stance on that too. Thank you.
Citizen?
Okay, my name is Ndewa, I'm with the SABC. In fact, most of my questions are covered by my colleagues, but maybe if I can just emphasize on one, especially the one on the special CEC that is planned that is instructed to be held by the NOPS. See, the Cosatu, you painting the alliance as a marriage in a state of paralysis. But this thing doesn't start today. Cosatu has been complaining about the relationship between the ANC, that sometimes you are being treated as step brothers and sisters, and you are only taken seriously when you go to elections. It doesn't start today, this thing. Are you trying to tell us that, in fact, NUMSA is vindicated when it didn't support the ANC at some point when it went to elections? Because you even decided to Chuck Nomsa out of Cosatu just for contesting its elections or not, or instructing its members to vote and to support the ANC. Do you think that you've made a mistake? Or you misread the situation there? And dealing with the ANC, are you dealing with a partner that doesn't listen, who's deliberately not listening to you?
Thank you. Over to leadership.
There's an answer there. Government does not listen.
Well, the General Secretary brings the microphones. Let me try and take some few. Let me maybe start with the last one. On Cosatu, and I'm going to link it with the one that spoke about the local government elections and the support for the ANC. We represent the views of our members. When the CEC is convened, it is the leadership of the unions affiliated to Cosatu who attend the CEC, and the CEC takes discussions and the views are debated. And we debate these issues with an appreciation that we have a Congress resolution on those matters. But that Congress resolution also says to the leadership of the Federation, which is the CEC, that beyond the general elections that we came from, what we want is a reconfigured alliance. And if those discussions are not bringing fruits, then the Cosatu must enter into a discussion about assessment of that relevance of us being in alliance. And then which political party, if we were to move away from the ANC, which is the SACP, but then the SACP must be ready. So the discussions that have taken place in the CEC are not discussions that are coming out of nowhere. They are as a result of a Congress resolutions of Cosatu, the last Congress. That's what we're mandated to do. And then a special CEC will be convened to specifically deal with this matter, to make the correct assessment as we move towards the Central Committee this year, which is a midterm review of the work that we have done in implementing conference resolutions as we move towards the national conference. And we must say that it is correct for workers to meet and assess issues as we move along, because we're informed by the material conditions that exist. We don't exist since conference and then there's a gap and we'll only start existing on the next Congress. By the time we get to the elective Congress of Cosatu in 2022, workers would have made the correct assessment, informed that that decision that would have been taken on this matter would have been a decision that is informed. How that is going to pan out in the special CEC, let's allow the CEC, special CEC that will be convened, to have that thorough debate. And the reason why this CEC did not make any pronouncement is because the 3-day CEC was not only discussing politics, it discussed a number of issues as the statement addresses. So allow the special CEC to then ventilate on this matter and guide Cosatu towards the local government elections and the Central Committee. And indeed, the frustrations are there. And frustrations are not only going to be defined by the public sector wage bill. Public sector wage bill is not the only issue that defines the relationship between Cosatu and the alliance and its alliance component. But also, we appreciate and we acknowledge that there are victories that workers under the Federation, within being in alliance with the ANC, that we have secured. But it does not take away the fact that there are frustrations on the socio-economic matters. So it will be important for us to allow that special CEC to enter into that debate, guide the federation towards the local government elections, because those local government elections may take place before the central committee. But I want also to dispel this thing that NUMSA was expelled in the federation because of its political posture. I don't know how many times we've been raising this matter, but it seems as if comrades come with an answer that you want to hear and you are convinced about it. And we can even tell you now that as much as NUMSA took that resolution in special Congress, members of NUMSA went and voted and campaigned for the ANC. So to take a resolution because you woke up and you felt angry at a particular moment on a particular matter does not mean that those that you represent, entirely all of them, will move with you in that decision that you are making. So that's why you must not be emotional about issues. Really, you must look into them and be realistic and understand what does it mean. And we are also saying, say Cosatu takes a decision and a resolution in its conference and says we're moving away from the ANC, as others always say, but is it not the best way to do? It does not make it that the problems of workers in this country will go away. Tell us one federation, those that you know that are not in alliance with the ANC, that have championed issues of workers and have won. All the issues that we are discussing and celebrating as victories of workers have come about because of this same federation that is in alliance with the ANC. Even those that left the federation cannot right now say, having been outside Cosatu and outside the ANC, these are the victories that we have won. So being in alliance with the ANC does not then say, then Cosatu is going to win many victories. Because it is the very same Cosatu that always says that we are independent from the ANC. That is why Cosatu is able, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, last year in October, mobilized the biggest marches across this country. It is the very same federation that is able to stand with its members. Because we are very clear where we stand on issues of our own constituents. But we understand that at some point, being in alliance with the ANC has also gave us some benefits, because there are victories that we have won, and we hope that one day, the media in this country will say to the federation, we acknowledge that these are the victories that you have championed on behalf of workers. Cosatu is busy at NETLEC. Cosatu does not sit only when we're having a central executive committee. Cosatu, day in, day out, throughout, workers, the staff of this federation and the leaders are working tirelessly to ensure that the working class, not just workers, the entire working class in this country is able to at least sustain their livelihoods. The grants that you are talking about, the 350 that continues to be extended, is because of the voice of this federation at the level of NETLEC. The maternity and paternity leave that are benefits to workers is as a result of the struggles that Cosatu is waging at the policy level in terms of NETLEC. The national minimum wage, that those that are earning below it are looking forward to the increment, it is because Cosatu has championed those issues. The ratification of Convention 190 and the fact that at the level of the International Labour Organization we have managed to win that, it is a struggle that Cosatu pursued for 2 years. Fought very hard, which we are now fighting, that we want to see that being ratified, because it's going to speak to the safety of workers at the workplace in relation to the issues that women in particular are confronted with. So we hope that one day you will be able, when Cosatu says these are the victories, you would acknowledge that these victories did not happen outside the alliance. So that when we begin this debate that you always want to take us to, it is of appreciation at the same time that it was not all doom and gloom. But of course, because contradictions are going to be found there, because remember, the ANC represents a multi-class. So it is a contested space. That is why Cosatu said we must swell the ranks of the African National Congress, so that you don't find in the NEC only one or two, You don't find in the PECs only one or two. You don't find in the branches only one or two of those that are workers and members of the federation. Because that's when we're going to be able to influence the policy direction of the ANC from the branch level going up to all the structures. So the relationship of Cosatu and the ANC did not start now post-1994. It is what brought the democracy in this country. So I think we must also appreciate how these relations have come about. And that is why we're calling for the reconfiguration of the alliance, because post-1994, one of our alliance components now is in government. So what are the relations? And we need to define that. Maybe let me just take this one and allow others to, leaders to take the others. Thanks, Sizu.
Why don't deploy like me come with me? Thank you, President, and thanks to the colleagues in media and Comrade Sis. Most of the questions were kind of not necessarily repetition, but the same. But maybe let me attempt to deal with the issue of the judiciary and the specifics that comrades are looking for. And they've now directed us, because they then asked specific questions about this thing of the judiciary. We didn't spend time in the CEC because there's a question that says, did you discuss the former president and the SG? We didn't do that. We entered a debate that is going on in the country about the judiciary and the rule of law and so on and so on. So as part of the civil society in this country, we felt it was important to enter that debate, including reaffirming the centrality of the rule of law and that there's no one who is above the law. So that's the most important thing that we say, because I'm sure you know that people are discussing this thing. Yes, in the process of the discussion, there are names and there are people that have been cited out, but they are not the only or the first one. All we're saying is that there are citizens of this country who have benefited from the same constitution. Some of them happen to be ministers, happen to have been leaders of organizations, happen to have been presidents of the state, simply because the Constitution gives them that right. We feel it's only fair that when it is their term to respect it and allow others to benefit from the same Constitution, they should afford such. The second point, which is our entry point, is that there is an orderly and a legal way of amending that which we do not like in the Constitution. You don't throw it away, all of it, because all of a sudden you feel aggrieved about it. When we are not happy, or when the employers are not happy, or are not treating us as workers, we do go to court. They don't always rule on our favor. As you know, the other time we wanted to go on strike, led by the banking union, SASBO, the courts at some point said, no, you can't go on strike. This is an illegal strike. We knew they were wrong. We were very clear they were wrong on law. We appealed it. A year later, we got the ruling on our favor. But we didn't say, no, to hell, we're going to go and strike, even when the court says we can't strike, when we were brought in front of the court. You know now that there is a dispute in the public service where government have taken its workers to court. We went to court and tried to defend ourselves. The courts sided with the state. We are appealing that in the Constitutional Court. We are awaiting the outcome. So all we are saying is that we can't descend into a state of lawlessness and anarchy simply because there are few things that we don't like. There are many things that we don't like, but we must find a way, South Africans, to deal with that. So that's a debate when we talk about. So it was not so much about this person and that person. In fact, no name ever came in the discussion of the CEC. As I said, we're dealing with a debate that is ranging in the country about judiciary. But that's why we're also making a point in our statement, colleagues, that political activists must be very careful to invite judiciary from time to time to the political space. Because when organizations that have been given responsibility to lead society and structures that have been elected that in between must persecute the wishes of the people fail to resolve political matters in their meetings, you're inviting the courts, you're inviting the judiciary to intervene because that's what they are. They are told that they are final arbiters. So we will cry foul by judges that we have invited into our political space, where we should have resolved our political issues without inviting the judges. But also we're saying, on the one hand, you have me, who when it suits me, I say I have a constitutional right. Even if my organization says something to me, I tend to compare that which my organization is saying to me vis-a-vis my constitutional right as a citizen of the country. And I tend to lean more towards exercising that constitutional right of mine over the organization that I have joined voluntarily. That has got also rules and constitutions and resolutions. But on the other hand, it is easy for me to say, but these courts are not fair. This constitution, I'm going to define it. So that's a point we're raising on the matters of the judicial. On the budget, so it's not in terms of sequence, I'm going to jump from politics to other things. On the budget, where we say we are disappointed, the question is it the issue of the wage bill or the dispute at public sector? The president have already said, no, that's not the only one. Of course, it's one of the huge ones because the minister did acknowledge the debt that the state has with a number of people, including the bonds, including the pension fund, the PIC, the banks, and the international market, and so on and so on. But he did not acknowledge the debt that they have with the public servants. The state has got debt with the public servants because they've negotiated and signed a legally binding agreement. And we say legally binding as far as we understand collective bargaining in this country to be, because it's a constitutional matter, it is also covered by the Labour Relations Act. And we equate the collective agreement signed between employer and employees to be legally binding. We equate it to any contract that you will enter with any person that you do transaction with. Either it's your car installment, either it's your house bond of the house, any contract that you have. There do comes at times when you have difficulties of paying back or fulfilling that obligation that you have, but doesn't give you the right to walk away. In fact, that or to acknowledge that, not to acknowledge the debt, that you actually do have a debt. You have paid installments for 15 months. On the 16th, 17th month, you are not able to pay, but you still owe people. So we will have hoped that the Treasury will have acknowledged that debt to start with. They said nothing about it, including not making provision, at least in terms of the wage bill for the next cycle. Disappointment. It's not disappointing necessarily because it is the public servants that are affected, much as it's very important because They are the foot soldiers that the state's objectives are based on. Those are the people who are supposed to deliver that which is the mandate of the state. But it's disappointing because many employers, the CEC noted, many employers in the private sector have walked away. They have actually cited this matter, that your government, they are telling our workers in the private sector, your government have reneged from a binding agreement. They went to court and the court agreed with them. That's what this private sector is saying. They agreed with the government. So they've set a trend and a precedence that most vulnerable workers are going to find themselves in trouble because of this. But the other thing that disappointed us on the budget, in an era where you're looking for more resources to grow the economy, to find vaccine, to fight COVID-19, you go on and reduce corporate tax from 28% to 27%, while in 2012 you have reduced it from 34% to 28%. When you do that, you don't even say to these workers, we're giving you tax incentives in order for you to create or at least to stop retrenchments. You're not putting any conditions. You just continue on giving private sector, particularly this big corporate money, without saying, but we want this, we are doing so that you must help us not to create or to grow unemployment in this country. You say nothing, much as you have outlined billions that are supposed to go into infrastructure. You say nothing about how we're going to curb corruption. And why it is disappointing, President, when he spoke on the State of the Nation address, he identified 4 key issues, which was health, growing the economy. One of it was fighting corruption. None of that came out of the speech yesterday about, as we put money, how we're going to stop the more than 154 billions that we lose every year through corruption, that deprives us of at least creating 76,000 jobs every year. How are we going to make sure that money that goes to municipalities and that gets spent by consultants and service providers, but the communities still do not have the roads, not have waters and houses? How are we going to stop that? So you can keep just pumping money there. It is disappointing that in an era where you want to strengthen public health system in order to defeat a pandemic, a public health system that was already on the brink of collapse even before pandemic, you reduce the expenditure. You reduce the expenditure on health. So that's why it's not only the public sector budget bill that is disappointing, but it's most of the entirety of the budget. What is the stance of the on supporting the ANC? Partly the president have covered that we continuously have a discussion in Cosatu. It's never stopped. So there's a question that came, I think, from SABC that says this is not a new debate about your disappointment. Exactly that. It's not a birth-given right that because there exists Cosatu, therefore there exists a right and a resolution to support ANC. It doesn't. It gets evaluated and discussed every time. So we are discussing here, which I will link it to the bilateral with the SACP. When the Central Executive Committee of Cosatu meets every quarter, it evaluates the implementations of Congress resolutions, and it makes the necessary adjustment. The President says, we have taken a resolutions in 2018 in the National Congress that says in the 2019 general election, this is what we're going to do, but we're going to do it along the lines of a reconfigured and alliance that is led by the ANC. And we then say, if this doesn't happen, this is what we think we must start working on. We are in a space where we have to evaluate that. That's why we're calling the constitutional structures to help the leadership to say, now that this has happened, we have gone past the 2019 election, that which we thought we were going to do doesn't seem to be having an appetite to create conditions for the workers at least to consider them as an alternative. What then do we do? That's what we're trying to do here, because in between we have a responsibility to evaluate our resolutions. So that's where we stand in terms of the support. By the way, workers on their own as citizens of this country will always support one party or another. But also as an organization, from time to time we take resolutions. That's why we think we want to see how we can firm up those resolutions. And you're asking a question, what conditions can the party, we want the party to create, and also party is not the first time that they try to contest. You mentioned Metsimahul. We must say they did very well there in Metsimahul. We don't agree that they lost this one. They did very well. They even got a mayorship there, if you forgot that. So, because contesting state power is not about overwhelming winning majority. If you are, at least you know what you stand for. All these political parties, including the ANC, have had decades as their track record to build themselves, to make sure that they position themselves, they can endear themselves to the society. Society must know what is it that they stand for. Society must know what is it that their interests are going to be taken care of if they vote for these people. But conditions can't just fall on your table. They have to be created. Momentum has to be built. You have to get out there and make sure that if you want society to support you, people must know about you. So that's all we are saying here about our party. And of course, perhaps they will have to clarify if that thing is no longer there, so that we know what workers must do. Are we not campaigning the ANC? No. We are debating. We are having in fact, we are helping the ANC. We're helping the ANC because it is possible that when, you know, that thing that is called sense of incumbents, when you are in power or when you are doing something, even here, if we are not criticized, we may not see things that we need to see. If you love somebody, you must be able to tell him the things that he needs to hear or he needs to know, not the things that he wants to hear or he wants to know. It is very important for the ANC to know the things that they need to know or to hear the things that they need to hear, not the ones they want to hear. Because what they need to know and what they need to hear is that workers are increasingly losing patience with them. Workers are increasingly having a view that the ANC has abandoned the aspirations and the objectives of the Freedom Charter. Workers are beginning to think that perhaps it's not correct that going forward their interest will be catered for by the ANC. If the ANC wakes up to that and walk away from the box that they have closed themselves in of arrogance and thinking that they know everything and them and only them understand these things, if they wake up to that, surely they are going to endear themselves again once more to South African society, but also to workers, and that we will have helped the ANC. If the ANC criticizes and thinks that we're accompanying them, it's their business, good luck, we have no problem with that. We welcome criticism. They must criticize it very harshly, constructively so. Even those that are not constructive, we don't mind. But at least it makes us to take time to reflect on how we do things, and we think the ANC can benefit from this seemingly criticism that we are raising on them. On the health ministry, well, we haven't been following that story, but it seems to be saying there's some form of corruption there. Exactly our point. One of the things that we are asserting in our statement, the rule of law, the judiciary, and the resolutions of the ANC, is that the ANC has vowed that it will fight corruption, irrespective of who it is implicated. If there's an allegation, for instance, about the son, the wife, the daughter, or the private secretary of the minister, you will remember that's the reason why. Even in the economic recovery plan that is here, when we negotiated in NETLEC, one of the pillars we were putting there was for the politically exposed people not to be allowed to do business with the state. And this is one battle, or that one issue that we lost recently now, which we are continuing to fight. That people must choose whether they want to serve, when they are politicians, whether they want to serve the government or they want to be in business. They can't do both. They can't do both. So that's our preliminary stance. It doesn't matter whether it's whoever it is, or it's a minister of whatever, for as long there is an corruption thing acted upon. If the organization that the minister belongs to believes that indeed there's something for the minister to answer, they must act accordingly as they will have acted with any but else. Because you see, the problem which we are bemoaning here as Cosatu is that there are certain things that get done by our leaders when it comes to the rule of law, that if it was done, we wouldn't be sitting, the show will be in jail by now. Now, roaming the street because they're dodging the law, and we all know that they are supposed to be held accountable. That's why we are raising. So we've really been following the story, but the point we're making is that to the extent that there's an allegation of a tender on vaccine by a close, connected person, the point we made that, in fact, politicians must not do business with the state, 1. 2, the politically exposed people, which is their closest people, also themselves should be barred from doing the business with the state. And like the president said, is NUMSA, we don't know if vindicated or anything. Because they were saying when they were here, and the things that Cosatu have been saying all along. And if anything, lesson from that you don't when you are angry, particularly electoral politics, we have learned lessons to tread carefully when we this matter.
Well, those were scenes from the Cosatu post-Central Executive Committee meeting, which we are just wrapping up. We're going to take a quick break, and afterwards, more of your news.